I know that must be pretty tough right now for most of you, so I hope that you are doing your best and trying to stay both sane and in shape in these times. I hope next week I can start to get back in shape. But at least we can take solace in the fact that there are people who seem to have completely sold out and lost any perspective or sense of standards, and it's starting to eat them alive, and those people happen to be on the political left. Now, for those of you that don't know, Joan Walsh used to be a personality who, I believe she was the editor of Salon for a number of years, and Salon started to take a dive back in 2015. So she jumped ship and she moved over to The Nation, which is the oldest left-wing publication in the U.S. I believe it was founded in the 1800s sometime. And she's been published a lot as a commentator. But The Nation traditionally draws a lot of its readership from people who are beyond just the center left. They happen to be people who are more towards the social democratic and democratic socialist left. Not necessarily the complete fringe, but you could say that they are well past the label of liberal. And she published this article on April 15th, which was Wednesday, called The Troublesome Tara Reade Story. And she's accusing left and right-wing Biden haters who demanded that the media investigate her sexual assault charge. And she says that there's many reasons to doubt it. Now, I know that I've been harping on a very, very important principle of Western justice, which is the presumption of innocence, or more specifically, the English and British liberal tradition of justice, which is that the accused have the right to a fair trial, which includes that they're presumed to be innocent until proven guilty. So I don't, in spirit, disagree with what Joan Walsh is saying, and I don't think we should automatically assume that Joe Biden is guilty of groping this woman, Tara Reade, or that he fingered her or any of the other things that he's accused of doing. The issue comes about when you see that in many cases, these people, including Joan Walsh, when it came to Brett Kavanaugh, and this is something that many people are pointing out, they've found that here, she had absolutely completely different standards. And somebody here, podcast host who interviewed Biden accuser, rips Joan Walsh for concern trolling about assault allegations. So we're talking about Katie Halper. So the fact of the matter is that if you remember at the time, and this is actually, let's go even further back before Kavanaugh. Do you remember the allegations against Senate candidate Roy Moore, the former justice of the Alabama Supreme Court? Well, a lot of the women who accused, Justice Moore never seemed to try to go beyond their accusations mere days after he was defeated in his bid for the Senate. So the fact of the matter is that the allegations against Roy Moore were completely political. There was no substance behind them that could be substantiated. And those allegations went back to the early 1980s. And then in a very similar manner, you had such allegations come up against Donald Trump in 2016. You also had similar allegations come up against Kavanaugh in 2018. And the issue with Tara Reade is that now people are saying that her allegations are coming up only in light of Biden securing the nomination, and that just simply isn't the case. First of all, people who, and these are people I'm no fan of at all, Ryan Grimm and Katie Halper, were highlighting these allegations during the month of March, which was well before Bernie Sanders pulled out of the campaign, thereby clearing the way for Joe Biden. And Katie Halper's reacting to Joan Walsh's story, saying, honestly, Joan Walsh, you've said some pretty rude things to and about me, but this is really, really low. I'm a diehard Bernie fan, and you're a diehard Hillary fan, Warren fan, Bernie hater, and Biden acceptor, which is fine. Just stop feigning objectivity and stop infantilizing. I didn't encourage her. She was trying to tell her story since Time's Up refused to support her in telling it. They refused because, as they admitted to Reid and Ryan Grimm, her allegation was against Joe Biden. You and others can make up any excuse you'd like for why they didn't. She continued, I understand this is uncomfortable because Trump is an odious person who should not be president. But if people listened to Reid in the first place, we wouldn't be in this decision. At least own your politics instead of concern trolling about the state of journalism and poor Tara Reid, who you care about so much, you'd like her to shut up and sit down. So here we go. So Walsh shot back saying, Katie, diehard Bernie fan is really low. And Katie Halper said, will you ID as a diehard Hillary and Warren fan, an avid disliker of Sanders? And if by encourage you mean I let her speak on my show, then sure. So so Katie Halper actually brings it up. The heart-wrenching trauma of the Christine Blasey Ford and Brett Kavanaugh hearings. It's difficult, it hurts, it's unfair, but women will keep telling our stories. That's from Joan Walsh in 2018. So the fact of the matter is, and I don't know if this exists on, let me see here, Anguish on the Campaign Trail. Here's a Twitter from September 25th. Brett Kavanaugh has made it perfectly apparent which women matter to him and which do not. And you have all these people who are fangirling over her. And when you see Joan Walsh's Twitter replies now, they're pretty clear as to who really believes her. It says, I believe Alyssa Milano. I think they were trying to they were weaponizing Me Too, since Bernie bros were using the same tactics and propaganda as MAGA. For starters, Alyssa herself, along with the media, as you pointed out, listened to Tara and saw flaws. Good article. So this David Weissman is a, he claims to be a former Trump supporter from New York, and that you have a lot of these people who I would say are just, they're shills. Okay, there's no other way to put it. This woman, Alexandra Halaby, there's all these people who are going after her and saying, well, if you believe this woman, you should believe this woman. I believe Tara. So this is rending apart the progressive left. And in fact, I would say most of the progressive left are rejecting Joan Walsh. And the problem with Joan Walsh is that she is, as much as we talk about Bernie Sanders being a sheepdog, Joan Walsh was a sheepdog before Bernie Sanders started sheepdogging in 2016. Joan Walsh was the person who started talking about the Bernie bros originally in 2016, calling them misogynistic, toxic, and that they didn't know how to relate to women. And now suddenly she's looking at people like Katie Halper, who's a woman, and she's saying, well, you're just a Biden hater, right? So it has nothing to do at the end of the day with whether you are a feminist or not a feminist. So this exchange I found interesting, was reading through it earlier. Thank you so much for this brave, thoughtful piece. One issue here is that the inconsistencies in the account, as well as the denial by some cited corroborating witnesses, would have typically led to this account not being published out of protection of the accuser as much as anyone else. What about all the women or the people that Christine Blasey Ford claimed were her corroborating witnesses who couldn't corroborate her account, claimed she never talked to them about it, said they'd never been to the party that she said that she'd been assaulted by Kavanaugh at. The person that she claimed was Kavanaugh's accomplice could not be corroborated as coming there. She couldn't name the date. She couldn't name the place. She couldn't even say even what city it was in. She couldn't say what month it was in. She had no recollection of any narrowing details of the event, and yet Joan Walsh believed her. So the evidence against Brett Kavanaugh was actually, I don't know if it's less than against Joe Biden. I don't know to what extent the evidence that Tara Reade has against Joe Biden is as strong. Well, for one thing, it's not been publicized as much. Mangy J says, so replying to her own tweet, says, however, some have found loopholes in pushing the allegations out there, which has in turn led to a dismantling of the story. Dismantling an accuser's story is not typically where journalists want to go, but that has been forced in this case by those who weaponize it. That is actually, that's turning against the actual cause known as the Me Too movement, because the Me Too movement was saying many, many times that it was illegitimate to question the motives and the actual evidence for why these women, mostly women, were accusing men of improper behavior. So a person replying to the poster, to the original person who replied, says, and that's the most infuriating part of all this, weaponizing the pain and experiences of those of us who are sexual assault survivors who weren't believed for politically convenient sabotage. Well, that's exactly what Me Too was. Me Too was a political sabotage movement. By the way, the same thing, you could say the same thing when Chris Matthews was taken out a couple months ago. I didn't really think it was justified in that case. None of these people cared. So this person, who's obviously pretty far to the left, says, isn't this exactly what you're doing now by not believing Tara because it's not politically convenient? So then the replier says, the original replier says, that's not what's happening. And then somebody says, yes, it is. Right? It's not hard to actually decipher this. This person says, I'm putting Biden in the same, quote, box as Al Franken. I usually believe the woman, but not these two times. Too convenient. So somebody replies, do you believe when it's convenient for you? Right? And then some people are trying to say, well, if you don't believe Biden's claims against her or Biden's defense, then do you believe Bernie Sanders' defenses? I think Bernie Sanders was once accused of writing he wasn't accused. He wrote some sort of rape fantasy story or something. It's not quite the same thing. It is a little strange. I think you should sort of kind of look at Bernie Sanders and say, what the hell? But it's not the same idea. This person wrote a very funny, sarcastic thing saying, thank you, Joan. Women make up sexual assaults all the time, and I'm glad the left is finally realizing that. Just think of all the damage done to wonderful men like Brett Kavanaugh and Harvey Weinstein over the past few years. We can restore what they lost, though. Well, not all the time. It's rare, but it happens, says this person, taking them seriously. So this parody account says, agreed, pretty clear both Mrs. Kavanaugh and Weinstein were punished appropriately. As Joan says in her piece, Me Too is about going to the police. And then somebody replies, how exactly was Kavanaugh punished? Getting a Supreme Court seat is a punishment now? And so then it just devolves into them arguing. So I think he was figured out. But yeah, most of the people here are not trusting her. But what I found surprising, and what I think the nation is going to come to regret, was actually publishing this piece, which we're not going to read through because, actually you could read through it if you wanted. Maybe I'll put it in the comment. I'll put it in the description. Sorry. But people are leaving comments here, and it says, did I expect this to be coming from Joan Walsh? No, but I am not surprised to observe the corruption she's willing to enact in order to preserve her neoliberal agenda. It's really disgusting that these faux feminists prefer their economic status at the expense of sexual assault victims. And most of the, I think you can reply or thumbs up, thumbs down. She got like a overwhelmingly 28-3 margin. You can't see because it's too small, but Elizabeth Vincent says, I'm seriously considering canceling my subscription to The Nation over this article. Tara Reid's allegations against Joe Biden may or may not be true, but for The Nation to allow Joan Walsh to publish this blatantly biased and hypocritical piece is just unacceptable. Miss Reid has already been smeared by the New York Times. The Nation could at least have tried to be more fair to her. Another person says, I have canceled my Nation subscription over this article. I am disappointed in the shift that the Nation has had towards a more centrist viewpoint over the past 5 to 10 years. Disappointing. Another person says, the hypocrisy on display here is unbelievable. All of these ones that are responding negatively to Joan Walsh's article have massive positive ratios. This person says, this is the sort of shameful hit piece with very selective information I expect to find in the current New York Times. It is no surprise to me that Walsh quotes heavily from their piece, nor is it a surprise that Walsh, who has always been part of the Democratic corporate media establishment, would apply this double standard quite different from the one applied to Blasey Ford to Reid. The only surprising thing is that the Nation would publish something like this. But Walsh's continued employment here never ceases to amaze me. As someone else in the comments notes, Nathan Robinson has a piece in Current Affairs that addresses many of the points Walsh raises here, yada, yada, yada. Then somebody writes that, this is, honestly at this point, if I knew the Democratic candidate shot a man in Reno just to watch him die, but would staff the federal government with tepid Obama-era officials and close off Federalist Society appointments to the Supreme Court, it would be self-evident that the only moral, socially responsible thing to do, certainly as regards the rights of women, would be to pull the lever for him or her. So what this guy is saying effectively is, doesn't matter whether Biden did or didn't rape or sexually assault a woman, you have to vote for her, even if he did something completely wrong, thereby disqualifying. This is the type of mentality that they have, that the whole thing where they were complaining about Trump having that comment where he could shoot a man on Fifth Avenue, and somebody even says that, welcome to Blue MAGA. Great, so now even our party will elect a man that shoots someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue. So far left people are waking up and seeing that they're essentially being corralled into the wrong crusade here. This person says the blatant hypocrisy in this article is outrageous. Walsh's view of this accusation is totally different from her view of Dr. Ford's. This is an attack on the victims of sexual assault. Shame on Walsh for publishing this. She has always been the worst writer at The Nation, but this is a new low. Shame on The Nation for publishing this. I am canceling my membership today. I'll be back when The Nation fires Joan Walsh. Bye-bye. So yeah, I think that I don't know how many people are subscribers. It's not a massive publication. I think they will lose a few subscribers. I don't know if all the people writing here, I think you have to be a subscriber in order to comment, but I don't know if all the people, it's hard to tell. I don't subscribe to The Nation, but in any case, I think that The Nation is going to lose some subscribers. The fact of the matter is, I believe that The Nation gets most of its revenue from the Nation Institute and other nonprofits. I don't think that necessarily they're in danger of closing down, but it's hard to tell. So, there's already a lot of turmoil there because they have, they were hoping that this whole squad thing with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they were hoping that would be the key to winning, and they even had this. They had a program written a few years ago called Future of the Party, where they wanted to take the reins of the party and kick out all the centrists, and it's worked the opposite way. They're basically being forced to go along with the centrists and back their candidate now because their candidate completely lost. He was bushwhacked. So even Waleed Shahid, who I've written a lot about, is trying to write this big article about how, maybe we need to figure out how to get Biden to earn our support. Well, if you're already opening the door for him to get your support, if you're already saying, well, we want to be able to support you, you just have to say the right things, well, then you've already lost. You've already lost because you have to make it seem like you're not won over and that you are on the cusp of basically not even voting or voting for someone else, even threatening in some cases to vote for, I don't know if they can convince anyone they're going to vote for Trump, but the fact is that there's no penalty to be feared by Joe Biden in this case. Obviously, he does fear losing from grassroots Democrats, from grassroots progressives, and they're probably not going to be, they're not going to be able to get all those people on board. All Biden needs is for these chiefs, these people who are claiming to be vote getters, like Waleed Shahid, like the Sunrise Movement, like, if not now, Next Gen America, all those organizations. The only thing that he needs to do is tell them, I'm talking about Biden, say to them, look, if you don't support me, you will not have a future because donors are not going to they're not going to keep donating to your campaigns. Most people don't care about your causes anyway. Your causes are just a vehicle for supporting Democratic candidates, so you don't have a choice. And that's all he has to say, because they've married their causes to the party. If they had been more independent, if they'd rejected partisan politics and gone completely for some sort of model where they're independent and they have the potential to support a third-party candidate and they build third-party movements, I don't think that Joe Biden would be so able to dismiss their bids, and he will. I think that he'll easily be able to laugh them off, and they'll probably fall apart because they don't have a choice. This is something that happened in New York in 2018. The far left endorsed Cynthia Nixon, who was, of course she was in Sex and the City, but she was the candidate who was going to be the progressive alternative to Andrew Cuomo. And they kept trying to make it seem like she was going to be the David versus Goliath candidate, and Cuomo was done, and he wasn't progressive enough, and et cetera, et cetera. What happened? Cuomo destroyed her. He won in some parts of downstate. I'm not talking about upstate New York, but in some parts of New York City, he won by an 80% plus margin. So she was destroyed, and they'd already backed her. So they'd also lost a lot of membership for their movements, including the Working Families Party, which it was under a fusion ticket, and they didn't have a choice. So they could have supported Nixon in the general and said, well, look, we're going to just fight Cuomo. We're not going to let him have our vote. But what happened? Cynthia Nixon ended up turning around and endorsing Cuomo too. So they didn't have a choice even of that. So the progressive movement has been victimized over and over and over again by this willingness to go along to get along within the Democratic Party. By the way, in New York, they could have endorsed the Green Party candidate that year, Howie Hawkins. I think there was another far left candidate at the time. I don't remember who. But the point of the matter is that if you are these far leftists now, you're in such an awful place. You're eating so many shit sandwiches that you think the shit is hazelnut chocolate. So that's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also subscribe to me on these other platforms for similar information. And I'll talk to you later.